I heard a glass of wine can prevent cancer, or does it cause cancer?
I don't think this video is about scolding those people that love and care and those people that have misstepped with their words.
Have you tried yoga? Yeah, I have.
I think this is really about the MBC community having a good laugh.
Have you swam in Lake Titicaca?
Hi, and welcome to the Alamo Breast Cancer Foundation's Advocate Chat. Today I have Dr. Danielle Kroll, who's a medical oncologist and with an FDA medical officer. She was with us last year during our live presentation in San Antonio with the FDA, and we're so lucky to have her back and have her give us this little prelude to what the live session is going to be like right after we finish. So thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Kroll.
Hi, Sandy. Thank you so much for having me back. We're really looking forward to answering some of the patients' questions today.
So to get everybody into the mindset of what you do and what the other medical oncologists do at the FDA, can you tell us a little bit about what the Office of the Center for Oncology Excellence does and what it is?
Yes, absolutely. So let me give you some background on the FDA before I dive into that answer. There are 3 FDA centers that review drugs, biologics, and devices that are intended for the treatment and the diagnosis of patients with cancer. These include the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research, and that's called CDER. There is also the Center for Biologics Evaluation Research, called CBER, and the Center for Devices and Radiological Health, called CDRH. Now, the FDA Oncology Center of Excellence, or the OCE, as some of you may have heard before, was established in 2017 per the Biden Moonshot Initiative after being authorized by the 21st Century Cures Act. And that was to facilitate the communication among those 3 FDA centers that I just described. And the purpose was to expedite the development and clinical review of oncology products by uniting scientific experts. Now, the OCE works very closely with the Office of Oncologic Diseases, which has 5 divisions. There are approximately 100 highly trained physicians and scientists in expertise in oncology, also hematological malignancies, radiation oncologists, and pharmacists, and that's the division that I'm in. Now, this office is further subdivided into divisions and specialty teams that are responsible for different cancers. All of these different teams are led by physicians that are specialists in that field. So, for example, I am on the breast cancer team and gynecological malignancies team. Now, I know that seems very confusing. However, these subdivisions do work with each other.
Okay, that's a mouthful for sure. So, how were you selected for this program, and how long will you be in the program? Is there a time frame, or do you apply, or does the FDA come to you? How exactly did you become involved?
Sure. So, Sandy, I was recruited to work for the FDA as a medical oncologist in 2018 when I was a hematology oncology fellow in Washington, D.C. at George Washington University. My area of interest at the time when I was a fellow in training was breast oncology, which is where I did most of my research as a trainee. I always had a special interest throughout my training in breast cancer, also clinical trials, patient outreach and advocacy. And I joined the breast cancer team in 2018 after graduating from my training program, and I have been at the FDA for the last 2 years. Now, there are 10 breast oncologists and gynecology specialists that work on the team. We all are responsible for reviewing new investigational agents that are being developed in breast cancer. And we also continue to review the safety of drugs that have been on the market for a specific indication.
So how long will you be on the team, or how will you go back to private practice? How does that work? Can you be there as long as you want?
Well, that's exactly correct, Sandy. I can be at the FDA for as long as I would like. Since I've joined the team, I've been so happy to be with such an amazing group of oncologists, and I really find my work so unique and enjoyable that I can see myself there for a long time.
So do you continue to see patients?
Yes, I actually do continue to see patients. I continue to see patients at George Washington University Hospital in Washington, D.C., because the FDA is not far from George Washington. Many of the oncologists at the FDA continue to actually see patients. However, time is limited as our full-time job is at the FDA, ensuring that all drugs manufactured for sale are safe and effective, and truthful information is being given on product labeling. The FDA supports our scientific professional development, and that actually includes opportunities to continue to see patients in clinics and in federal hospitals in the district, such as the NIH, Walter Reed, or even at the Veterans Hospital. The FDA also offers a range of training seminars, grand rounds in science, and lectures for staff to stay current about our scientific literature and cutting-edge science. So the opportunity to still see patients is such a unique opportunity at the FDA that I really enjoy doing that, and it also really allows the medical officers at the FDA to offer a little something special and unique, actually, when we provide advice to pharmaceutical companies regarding the development of their programs throughout the whole drug development process. And it really does make our work so much more impactful.
So I know you told us about the drug that was approved in November. Can you tell us about any other immunotherapy drugs that are in trials or that may be coming up for review?
Yes, absolutely. So, Sandy, the question that we get asked all the time is, can immunotherapy treat breast cancer? Now, for certain patients, the answer is yes. We have 2 immunotherapy drugs that are approved in metastatic breast cancer. One that you may have heard of is called atezolizumab, and the other drug is called pembrolizumab, which I had just mentioned. Now, the first checkpoint inhibitor immunotherapy drug, atezolizumab, was approved in early 2019. Atezolizumab is given in combination with another drug called Abraxane, and that is for the treatment of metastatic triple-negative breast cancer in patients whose tumors express the PD-L1 protein. And pembrolizumab, the other checkpoint inhibitor, as I had mentioned, was approved in November of this year. And pembrolizumab is also for the treatment of patients with metastatic triple-negative breast cancer whose tumors express the PD-L1 receptor. So this is a really exciting field. Yeah, it is such an exciting field, and we really hope that we continue to see more development in this area.
I think it's wonderful that now there's at least 2 immunotherapy drugs for breast cancer, even though they are for a particular type of breast cancer, but that's more than what we had before, so that's very positive. So going on, right now, everybody is COVID this, COVID that. So there's been so much discussion among cancer patients about COVID-19. What do I do? Do I continue treatment? Do I stop treatment? Is it safe to go to the hospital? What is your opinion on what patients should do?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Sandy, we're getting so many questions about this. And, at the FDA, we recognize that everyone's daily lives have been disrupted by the COVID-19 pandemic, and really that the impact has been probably hardest on those with medical conditions or weakened immune systems, and also those undergoing treatment for cancer. And, although the nation's emphasis has been on the need to combat the coronavirus, our top priority at the FDA and the Cancer Center continues to be on patients with cancer and their needs. Our work is to improve education and resources and outreach and communications regarding product development, and it still continues throughout the pandemic. We are very committed to our patients with cancer and healthcare providers, and we're really here for everyone during this most difficult time. Now, we continue to expedite our oncology product development, and we do recognize, and really support that a lot of modifications may be required in clinical trials, such as changes in study visits or missed visits, or even that study discontinuations may have happened due to the coronavirus. Now, the FDA has issued a guidance, and it's publicly available on our website, so anyone can look that up. And that really is a wonderful resource because it's providing general considerations to assist sponsors or pharmaceutical companies in assuring the safety of trial participants and minimizing risks of trial integrity, okay? Now, and this is to go on for the duration of the COVID-19 pandemic. We're also meeting with companies to discuss modifications to ongoing and future clinical trials to support to account for any COVID-19 diagnosis and its potential impact on efficacy endpoints in trials. Even adjustments to safety monitoring protocols or dosing regimens as well. And, what do we tell patients to do in terms of should they skip treatment? If they were just diagnosed, should they postpone treatment? Now, this is really that treatment decision on what to do. Treatment decisions must be made on a case-by-case basis. It is really essential to balance the need for treatment, okay, for this very serious cancer, and also the extra risk that COVID-19 may pose on cancer patients who may have a compromised immune system. Therefore, we are recommending that this is a discussion between you and your healthcare provider. And Sandy, we know that COVID-19 has had a significant impact on the number of patients undergoing cancer screening, cancer diagnosis, and, cancer staging also. So when it comes to determining the next course of action in newly diagnosed breast cancer, your doctor may consider several factors, such as your age, your overall health, your type of cancer, also the stage, and what kind of treatment that you will require. So things that I'm telling patients that you can do that are in your control is talk to your doctor about precautions at the clinic or the hospital. You may feel more comfortable knowing what to expect, such as the precautions that you will need to take for an in-person visit, such as wearing a mask, or will there be social distancing among the other patients. And your doctor may even recommend that you get tested for coronavirus before beginning a new treatment. So whenever possible, talk to your doctor. Your doctor may be able to do a virtual appointment rather than an in-person appointment. Okay. Now, having a clear path forward with the help of your team of physicians will really help protect yourself from the coronavirus, but also not delay or postpone any treatment of your cancer.
Awesome. So if somebody wanted to look it up on the FDA website, can you give us the website that they need to look at?
Yes, absolutely, Sandy. Everyone can go to our website at www.fda.gov, and on that homepage of the website, you'll be able to put in the search bar any resource that you're looking for, whether it was the guidance that we had talked about, or just coronavirus and cancer, and you'll be able to be directed to the page that will provide all the information.
Is there anything else you would like the audience to know about the program?
Yes. My job as a medical oncologist at the FDA, specifically in the Office of Oncologic Diseases, it is very, very diverse. Now, we are responsible for ensuring cancer drugs benefit outweigh the risks, but also that there is truthful and informative product labeling. We also partake in various outside activities, such as teaching about regulatory science at university grand rounds. And we also work with so many patients in different advocacy groups across the country. And we do that to gain feedback about clinical trial inclusion criteria and also maybe endpoints, for example. And then we relay that information to companies. And it really does influence our decision to write guidances for industry. We also may offer online resources for patients, and that can be found on our website, which I had mentioned, fda.gov. And lastly, Sandy, we propose very bold initiatives to move the field forward as quickly as possible. For example, a very important project that we started in the last year is called Project Facilitate. And this is a call center where FDA oncology staff will help physicians that are treating patients with cancer throughout the process of submitting a expanded access request for an individual patient to receive access to unapproved therapies. This is something that we thought was really important, that there could be help in doing this process, and that we can kind of keep the communication going very strongly between the oncologist and us to help them facilitate this and moving forward and getting patients the drugs that they need as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I think that's awesome, especially the last part about helping the medical oncologists out in the field who have a patient that may need a different drug that they think may help them. So I think that's really awesome of y'all to be doing that. So also I wanted to tell everybody, because I do this on Twitter. Y'all have a Twitter feed that you have from the FDA and for oncology. So I see a lot of the new drugs or whatever, from your Twitter. So I don't know who's doing it, but they're doing a great job.
Yes. We're really active on Twitter. We just find that as another resource for patients. We have a very strong patient presence on Twitter, and we're so happy to see that. And we're just we love that we're able to use that platform to get information out quickly as to what drugs are being approved and other various projects that we're working on. So yes, follow us on Twitter, and we're happy to answer any other further questions that any of the patients may have.
So thank you so much, Dr. Kroll. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to you to moderate the rest of the live show uh, with the oncologists that will be on the program. So thank you again so much for this set up, basically, for the live session. So we really, really appreciate it.
Great. Thank you for having me, Sandy. For being here today, and welcome to the Patient Advocate and FDA panel question and answer session. I hope everyone was able to learn a little bit more information about our team during the one-on-one with Sandy. So before we begin actually our panel discussion, I want to thank Sandy Stanford and the Alamo Breast Cancer Foundation and the entire production team for which this event would not be possible today. We really look forward to this every year, and we're so happy that we could be here again, however, in a much different format. But nonetheless, we are so excited to answer all of your questions. Now, as a reminder, if you have any questions, please place them in the Facebook chat throughout the next hour. Do not wait until the end. We'll be kind of asking questions. We will be answering questions throughout the entire next hour. So be sure if you have any questions to just place them in the chat, and we hope that we can get to them. So with that, I will introduce our panel today, and then we will go right into your burning questions that you guys all have at home. So again, I am Danielle Kroll. I am a medical oncologist with the FDA, and it's my pleasure to be here today and to moderate this question answer session with the FDA panel. I will quickly introduce everyone, and then we will get on with the show. Today, joining us from the FDA on our team, we have Dr. Melanie Royce. If you don't mind waving. We have Dr. Suparna Wedam, and we have Dr. Christina Bruce. All right, wonderful. And we also, as you know, we have a much larger breast cancer team, and unfortunately, not everyone was able to be with us today on the panel, but they are giving their well wishes from home and look forward to this event next year. So with that, I will kind of dive right into the questions. And again, be sure to ask your questions in the chat, and hopefully we will get to them. So question number one is really directed to all of us. And that is, what does the breast cancer team do, and how are you selected to be on the team? So I will kind of direct that question to everyone, but if anyone would like to take that question and explain what we do as a breast cancer team. Suparna, would you like to start that?
Sure. Thanks, Danielle, and I'm so excited to be here. Sorry that we can't be together in San Antonio, but I'm glad that we have this forum to talk a little bit. So we do a lot of things on the breast cancer team, and we have a variety of activities, I think, which is really what makes it very exciting and very interesting. And so the work that we do, there is no one normal day or one, and especially in this time of COVID with us working from home. But, you know, the majority of our work revolves around regulatory work. So we are reviewing the applications, and that's what the sponsors submit to us to review for approvals, and reviewing protocols with them. And so going through a lot of the drug regulatory history. But what's very exciting is that we have the access to be involved in many other educational activities, outreach programs, clinical practice and professional development opportunities that you mentioned at the beginning in the interview also. So there are many mini symposia that we're involved with, workshops. We have many outreach programs with patient advocates and other stakeholders that we will discuss specific topics or, regulatory issues that come up regarding either a specific problem or a specific drug. And then we do have the opportunity to do a lot of kind of academic type of work in looking at the databases and the information that we have available at the FDA. So even publishing abstracts, publishing manuscripts, speaking opportunities. So we have a host of things that we do as a medical officer here, and I think really that's what makes it very interesting. As far as becoming a part of the breast cancer team, I think most of us, we are medical oncologists. When we come to the FDA or interview for this position, and myself included, much of my interest and my background was always in breast cancer. So through my fellowship, working on breast cancer clinical trials and having that interest and kind of really maintaining that as one of my interests, and saying that is what has, placed us all on the breast cancer team.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. And Christina, would you like to share with everyone maybe perhaps something that you love about being on the breast cancer team, or how you were selected to be on the team?
Sure. I'm very excited to be speaking to everyone today. I am a recent addition to the FDA breast cancer team. I joined in the fall of this year, and I was in clinical practice for over 9 years. I have a very strong interest in breast cancer and clinical research and clinical trials for breast cancer going back to my fellowship training. I worked at Thomas Jefferson University Hospital at the Sidney Kimmel Cancer Center for 9 years. And then I also worked at 3 years at the MD Anderson Cancer Center in Camden, New Jersey. And I focused exclusively on breast cancer patients, and I was able to enroll patients on clinical trials during the entire time that I was seeing patients full time. So I know firsthand exactly what it's like to be a patient enrolled on a clinical trial for breast cancer. I know what it's like to be the treating physician. And so when I joined the FDA, I think that gives a unique perspective, because I have a lot of experience of exactly what it's going to be like when we approve different clinical trials to take place in cancer centers in different parts of the country. I like a lot of things about working at the FDA. I think it's very interesting to see, to have a larger picture of a lot of different clinical trials going on in multiple different cancer centers, rather than just the few individual that were available in my specific hospital. I think it's a very inspiring place to work, and I love working with such wonderful colleagues.
Great, thanks for sharing that. And last but not least, Melanie, if you could share with everyone a little bit about you and what you do on the breast cancer team, and why you love to be a part of the team.
Thank you, Danielle. Absolutely. Unlike many of my colleagues, and some of my colleagues, I share similar backgrounds with them, but for over 20 years, I have been in academic medicine and seen patients, run clinical trials, etc. I joined the FDA a little over 15 months ago, and what I can tell you is that being at the FDA is still like being in academic medicine. So I love that about being in the FDA. It's very intellectual. There's a lot to do that really challenges your skills and challenges your brain, so to speak. Probably the only difference that I see between my previous life and my life at the FDA is that I don't see patients currently. I hold 2 licenses, but I don't hold the Maryland license. So really the only place I could practice would probably be the Veterans NCI Walter Reed. I've been debating whether I want to go back and see patients for a sort of limited period of time. But of course, COVID happened. And at this point, I'm not seeing patients, although I have a very lengthy clinical experience. Nonetheless, being in the FDA, as I said, I love this because it's a good balance between your work life and your own life. And that's probably the big blessing that I see moving from academia to the FDA.
Great. Thanks, Melanie, for sharing that. I know we had, talked about this throughout just our initial introductions here. However, patients really want to know if we continue to see patients while we work at the FDA. And you had heard in the advocate chat with Sandy that we have an opportunity called professional development. So I'm going to pose this question to Suparna. If you could take this question, is do you see patients even though you work for the FDA?
Yeah, so thanks, Danielle. I do still see patients, and as you mentioned in the interview, this is a unique opportunity that we have as a part of professional development here, as part of our position at the FDA. So I joined the FDA approximately 10 years out from fellowship, so I had been full-time at the NCI seeing patients and training the fellows there, and I joined the FDA approximately 8.5 years ago. And so since the beginning, I have continued to see patients in the breast care center at Walter Reed Military Medical Center, and I staff the multidisciplinary clinic there. And I have to say, I do find it to be one of the most fulfilling aspects of my job here. I really do enjoy the regulatory work, and I think the work we do is so important. But being able to see firsthand how those decisions that we make, the policies we have in place, how they impact the patients is so important. And, just understanding how it impacts them and how we could, improve upon that. So I do continue to see patients and enjoy that.
Great, thank you. Okay, we have questions coming in, and patients are so curious to know so many things, and we're so excited to get to so many points today. So the next question coming in from a patient is, it is so important to have representative participation in clinical trials. How is the FDA improving participation by including underrepresented populations, such as minorities, and underrepresented ethnic groups in clinical research? Okay, wonderful question. I will direct that question to Melanie. Melanie, if you don't mind sharing us your thoughts on that question.
Absolutely. So really over the years, the FDA has promoted enrollment practices that would involve sort of underrepresented population, not just minority populations, but rather underrepresented underrepresented populations, so that the goal is the clinical trials represent the broader U.S. population most likely to use the drug. And we do this primarily by helping to craft what should be an eligibility criteria for a clinical trial. And eligibility criteria really are what are the things that patients must meet to be able to participate in a clinical trial. We recognize that even despite our best efforts, it's still true that there are many parts of the U.S. population that are not represented in the clinical trials that we see come through the FDA. So some of the efforts that we've done to broaden this participation in clinical trials is one we call Project Community. This program encourages interactions with FDA and diverse communities that have not traditionally interacted with the agency. For example, small rural areas, inner city communities, to really hear their points of view about participating in clinical trials and the barriers. We've also organized events which we've entitled Conversations on Cancer, and this is open to the public to address barriers to clinical trial participation among minority and underrepresented groups. In this Conversations on Cancer, we invite panelists, including patients and advocates from the said minority groups or underrepresented groups, so that we may hear about their experience regarding barriers and potential solutions to these barriers. We've also published a series of guidelines to provide recommendations regarding eligibility criteria. As I've told you before, this is really one way to broaden participation of patients. So for instance, some of the guidances that we've published include including patients with brain metastases who are traditionally excluded from clinical trials, include male breast cancer patients, include patients that have well-controlled viral infections such as HIV, hepatitis, or hepatitis B and C. And also, in the broader clinical trials for breast cancer, traditionally we've offered this only to postmenopausal women. But if there is no reason to exclude premenopausal women, we've just recently issued a guidance on involving or including premenopausal patients, breast patients, in these types of clinical trials.
Great. That's really great. Thank you for sharing that, Melanie. Really such a wide display of guidances and wonderful opportunities for for really understanding how we can improve this participation by including these underrepresented groups. So thank you for sharing some of the things that the FDA does to help that. All right, now the next question coming in pertains to monitoring adverse events in breast cancer clinical trials. And the question is, I understand that the adverse events and toxicities can be measured in blood, like platelet count, for example. But for other things, such as nausea, fatigue, or chemo brain, how are these things measured? So I will direct this question to a member of our panel. Suparna, if you don't mind explaining how adverse event reporting is done in a clinical trial.
Sure. Thanks, Danielle. So, assessing the safety profile for a drug is so important. And so I think this is a great question. And there are a variety of ways that we can document or measure the side effects and the adverse events. And so one of the most commonly used ways to standardize this is something called CTCA. And so this stands for the Common Terminology Criteria for Adverse Events. There are other methods, but this is a way of standardizing that. So as mentioned in the question, laboratory parameters may have an actual number, but we still want to see if they are lower or higher than what would be normal. And then as far as other adverse events, such as nausea or vomiting, diarrhea, these somewhat more subjective adverse events, this provides a standard way of grading the severity of that. And typically this is 1 to 5. And this is how this is captured from the provider's perspective. And so an adverse event in a protocol is typically any unexpected experience or side effect, regardless of causality. So that's another part that we do try and capture. And so interpreting all of this can be complex and messy, and we try and go through that to provide the best information possible for when we end up labeling drugs. But we know that there are really there are a lot of limitations to this, and this is not ideal. Again, as I mentioned, how we typically capture these adverse events is from the provider's perspective, but a huge component of this is the patient. I mean, because the patient is the one with the adverse effects. And so getting the perspective from the patient. And so we have several tools that can be used, and we discuss with sponsors when they come in with clinical trials. These are PROs, or patient-reported outcomes. And so we are always reviewing this and discussing how this could be used to complement the other methods that we have to collect the adverse event information. because we also know that the adverse events as they're reported from a provider perspective are grossly underreported. In fact, that was in one of the presentations at San Antonio just this morning that was reviewed. So we know to get a very complete picture of that, we need to be looking at different tools. And so there is a great push to be looking for this.
Great, thank you for sharing that. All right, we are getting questions in from the chat. Thank you guys so much. Please continue to do that. And we are seeing tons of questions about COVID-19. So I know that, I had even discussed that with Sandy in our one-on-one interview. However, we're going to bring it up again because the questions are just coming in right now through the chat bar here. So there's been a lot of discussion regarding cancer patients and COVID-19. I discussed a little bit about how COVID-19 is affecting clinical trials, but there's so many more questions about this. So I'll ask Christina, can you share some of your experiences? What were some of the experiences that you had had? You had mentioned that you were in clinical practice before joining the FDA. So what are some of the experiences that you had had in the clinical setting since the beginning of the pandemic?
Sure. So I was actually seeing patients, I remember the very first week of the crisis. So I certainly understand what a scary time it is and how anxious everyone is during the COVID crisis, but particularly for patients who have cancer and are undergoing active treatment. The most common question which comes up is patients ask if they should be continuing their chemotherapy or other treatments. And first of all, that's always something that should be discussed directly with your doctor and healthcare provider team to decide if that's appropriate. I think for the vast majority of patients, we were very much interested in continuing their active treatment for their cancer. When I talked about it with my patients and when I saw patients in the office, I think it's important to understand that there's lots of safety precautions which are put in place by cancer centers for your in-person visit. So the patients and the staff will all be wearing a mask. All of the staff and everyone working in the cancer center and the infusion center has appropriate PPE or personal protective equipment. A lot of staff members even have, in addition to masks, they have eyewear and eye shields. In many places, there is a temperature check of everyone that's entering the building, and everyone has to discuss if they're having signs or symptoms that would be consistent with COVID, and if so, they stay home or the appointment is canceled. When you enter the building, in many cases, the waiting room and the doctor's office and even the chemotherapy infusion suite is set up to maintain social distancing. So patients will sit at least 6 feet apart in the waiting room and also in the infusion room. There's always many cleaning and sterilization protocols for any type of healthcare facility, but particularly with the COVID crisis, they have amended those protocols so that they have extra cleaning and disinfection going on between all patients and staff, particularly for the COVID crisis. So all of these things help minimize the risk to patients who are continuing to get chemotherapy during the pandemic. And I think that telehealth is very established now for multiple types of doctors' offices across the country, including oncology offices. So patients who are not actually receiving a chemotherapy or treatment, who just need to check in with their doctor, they can do a lot of that by telehealth visit and stay connected to their healthcare team that way. So although it's very scary, I encouraged everyone to discuss directly with their doctor and healthcare provider, and using all of these safety precautions, the vast majority of the patients that I was treating were able to continue with their treatment.
Great, thank you. And a follow-up question, the patient is asking us to comment how long it takes from for an IND application to get approved. But I think what else we can add to that is during COVID, excuse me, how long it takes to get an application approved, and has there been any delays in approvals due to COVID? Suparna, do you mind maybe commenting just a very little bit about how long it takes to get an IND application approved?
Sure. So an IND, for those of you that may not know, is an investigational new drug application. And that is something that is submitted to us for a drug to be an unmarketed or even marketed drug in a clinical trial for that to start here. So there are different criteria, which I won't get into all of that, but it is an application that is submitted to us before most protocols are started here in the United States. And the timeline that starts on the calendar, once those are submitted to us, and our review calendar has not changed through COVID. So we have a 30-day timeline to review those, and that has not changed. So once those are reviewed and approved on our end, as far as the sponsor actually then starting the protocol, there may be delays there, but that's beyond our hands. So that part I don't think has changed. As far as drug approvals, I have to say we have been very busy and have continued to be quite busy through this COVID era. So I think we have learned to adapt to all of our, our new circumstances and doing the work. So I would have to say that we really have not had many delays. There have been challenges that we have had to deal with as far as so when I'm talking about a drug approval separate from an IND, so that's when we get an application to come in for a drug to be approved for the first time, and that's a much longer process, a few months, weeks to a few months process. There have been some challenges we have had to deal with that because there are many components that go into a drug review in that sense. And so when we are talking about, possibly inspections that may need to go in for that, inspections of clinical sites, so different components of that have been challenging, but I think overall we have not had any delays really in our timelines from our regulatory work in that sense.
A question actually, before I move forward, a question came in, and it is regarding some of the other questions that we had already discussed, but someone wants to know if there's a process for patients to report adverse events directly to our team. So that's a great question, kind of just piggybacking on the question about adverse events. And, I'll tell you that absolutely yes, patients do have the ability to report a safety concern or a negative event with any FDA regulated product. And you can do that by a program called MedWatch. It's really a great resource that you're able to do that. And that's event report program called MedWatch. And you can find that on FDA.gov. And you can even go into the search bar and look for a program called MedWatch. Thank you for that question. All right. And we have another question here from a patient who wants to know, what is fast track and how does a drug get fast tracked? Melanie, do you mind talking a little bit about what fast track is?
Sure. First, I'd like to start by mentioning that there are 4 approaches to making drugs available as rapidly as possible. In addition to what you've asked, which is fast track, there is breakthrough therapy designation, priority review, and accelerated approval. And let me just go through how a drug goes through each of these. So in fast track, when drugs are designated as fast track, they really it's sort of a lower bar. They have the potential to address an unmet medical need. And ultimately, fast track, the process of fast track speeds new drug development and review. And there is more communication between the person that wants the drug designated as fast track and the FDA. In contrast, breakthrough therapies are drugs with preliminary clinical evidence demonstrating that the drug may result in substantial improvement of one of the study results, which is what we call endpoints, over available therapies for a serious or life-threatening disease, which obviously cancer is, or an unmet medical need. A breakthrough therapy designation includes all the elements of a fast-track program, as well as more intense FDA guidance on an efficient drug development program. So breakthrough therapy designation is shortening the development time of a potentially new therapy. Now, in terms of priority review, a drug receives priority review if that drug could potentially provide a significant advance in medical care. The drug is reviewed within 6 months instead of the standard 10 months. And that's what we would call a priority reviewed drug. Now, accelerated approval program allows FDA to be more flexible at the endpoints that are used to approve the drug and offers a benefit over current treatments for that serious or life-threatening illness. So a drug that is given accelerated approval must offer a benefit over current therapy. These accelerated approval may include ones that show benefit over a shorter duration of treatment compared to a longer duration of treatment, better safety profile, better efficacy, etc., and are considered reasonably likely to predict an important clinical benefit that will be seen, such as, not dying early or living longer. So those are the various elements of getting a drug to you, the patients, faster than we would normally than it would normally take for drug approval. There's sort of certain bars that they must meet in order to be designated either fast track, breakthrough, or accelerated approval.
Okay, great. Thanks for sharing that perspective, Melanie. All right, the next question that I will ask, coming in from a patient advocate, is going to be, let's see. All right, so we're talking back about enrollment criteria. So as advocates, we feel the trial populations often don't represent the population the drugs are intended for, and the studies are blatantly cherry picking their samples by only including the healthiest of the sick. Why is exclusion criteria so restrictive, especially for exclusions such as active brain metastases or, quote, too many prior line treatment, or even irrelevant or comorbidities that do not put you at risk? That's a great question. Suparna, do you mind answering this question for us?
Sure. Thanks, Danielle. And that is a great question. And I completely agree that the eligibility criteria sometimes can be really, too restrictive. So the whole point of eligibility criteria is to protect the safety of the trial population, the trial participants, and to help define the patient population for that trial. And by being too restrictive or overly excessive, this can be almost defeating the purpose of getting useful information out. It can actually slow accrual, obviously, if it makes it difficult to get patients onto the study. And it makes it difficult to really generalize or interpret those results so that we can apply it to the real world or general population, the patients that are in front of us. And so for this reason, we have really been involved in quite a large initiative here at the FDA in collaboration with ASCO and the Friends of Cancer Research to broaden eligibility criteria as much as possible when we can safely do that. And so I think really the motto is to be as inclusive as possible again, maintaining safety at the heart of what we do and really providing justification for any exclusions that there are. And many of you may already be aware, and Melanie already mentioned this, that the first go around with this really tackled some very important subjects of patients with brain metastases, patients that are HIV positive, patients with prior concurrent malignancies, or looking at the age requirements. And so this all resulted in several manuscripts that were published in JCO and subsequently FDA guidances in really being able to discuss this with sponsors. And so currently we are in the second go around with that right now. We are looking at eligibility criteria as they pertain to prior therapies. So either requiring too many or not. So kind of either extreme. Lab abnormalities and the reference ranges, the concomitant medications that are, excluded sometimes in washout periods, and looking at performance status. And we discuss this whenever we're talking with sponsors also. And as we're reviewing protocols, we of course do not write or run any protocols at the FDA, but we are closely involved with that. And so we are really careful to always be looking at the eligibility criteria that come in with these protocols. Something that we typically used to see in breast cancer studies were saying that women over the age of 18 are eligible. Well, the question is, why are men not? And so that's something that I think we have made commonplace. Then the second thing was, patients with brain metastases are often excluded. And, so making sure that they're providing justification for why, or saying that there are ways that this can be included, cutoffs for organ dysfunction and for lab abnormalities. So, sometimes when we discuss with the sponsors, we can't make them do this. We really encourage it, and they may push back a little bit. And so we talk to them about some of the perks of doing this, that really this makes the results more generalizable, that we would be able to provide this information in the labeling, and that there are different trial designs that could be done to include these patients. So again, I think the bottom line here is we're trying to be as inclusive as possible. And when patients are excluded, there should be a good justification and rationale for that.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Suparna. The next question is, how does the FDA work with patients, and how can we be involved? That's a great question. And I'll actually start answering this question. We definitely want to just reiterate, patients are really at the heart of what the FDA does, and we recognize that importance of empowering patients and, enhancing their role in medical product development and the importance of that. So some ways you can get involved. So as an advocate, like I had mentioned, you have that ability to report safety concerns using the FDA's information and event reporting program called MedWatch. You can also connect with FDA's patient affairs staff directly, and they will help patients become more informed and involved in FDA regulatory decisions that are related to medical products. Other things you can do is you can join a patient-led listening session, which is an initiative that allows FDA staff to hear directly from patients and caregivers about their experiences living with their diagnosis. We've also in the past held public workshops, and we've even held public workshops that are focused solely on patient-focused drug developments. And I'm sure some listening have been a part of these. And these workshops are really wonderful because they gather input from really that wider community of patients and advocates and researchers and drug developers. And the purpose of those types of events are to obtain feedback for various considerations, such as endpoint development or data collection and even clinical outcome assessments, which we had kind of touched upon a little bit. So all of those opportunities for patients are there, and we really want you to engage with us. And you can learn more about patient engagement visiting our website, fda.gov/patients. And there you can find some of our various resources. Okay, next question we will go to is from a patient, and this is about maximum tolerated dose. And the question is, I wish that the first option in clinical trials would not be maximum tolerated dose. I knew that I needed a lower dose because I always needed a lower dose than what was prescribed for all drugs. Because of clinical trial rules, I had to suffer through the first 2 dose reductions and all of the associated symptoms, and then also take several breaks from therapy. Okay, so Christina, do you mind talking about why is it important, or why is establishing a maximum tolerated dose so important?
Sure, I'd be happy to talk about that. I feel a lot of sympathy for patients who are struggling and having difficult side effects on the dose when on a clinical trial. I really empathize with that. The maximum tolerated dose is established during the very early phases of a clinical trial, and they take a very small number of patients and give them a very tiny amount of the dose of the study drug. And if there's no side effects and it's well tolerated, then they will take another very small amount of patients and give them a slightly higher dose. So they build up very slowly over time, making sure that everything is safe and with no excessive side effects for the patients. And that gets up to a maximum tolerated dose, which is necessary to treat and fight the cancer. So if we were to give someone on a trial, let's say 50% or something just below the maximum tolerated dose that's indicated in the trial, my concern would be that we're underdosing the patient. And because the dose is not the full strength, I would worry that it's not going to adequately fight the cancer. And it may make it look like the trial drug is not working or is not effective, and it would possibly affect the outcome of the trial itself. So that's why we start at the maximum tolerated dose, which is indicated from the early phases of the trial. And then certainly if you're having side effects or symptoms, that's always something you discuss with the doctor or the healthcare team. And then if the dose needs to be reduced, or you need to take a pause or stop the drug for a certain number of days, that's specified very clearly in the trial protocol. So you can go down by a certain stepwise level. So that's a very difficult problem, but unfortunately we're not able to give people lower doses and build up. We start with the maximum tolerated dose, and then certainly we can dose reduce if it's necessary.
Thank you. Thank you for answering that. Okay, we are running short on time, and there's always so many questions that come in and only such limited time. And I'm really sorry if we can't get to all of them today, but we will try to put in one more question here. And this is a question from an advocate, and the question is the FDA incorporating real-world evidence to learn more about adverse events, or even having to stop treatment early? Great question. Suparna, do you mind taking that question for us?
Sure. Thanks, Danielle. I think, real-world data and evidence are really hot topics right now, and we talk about it a lot at the FDA. So in the post-marketing setting, which refers to the question there regarding safety signals, the post-marketing setting where after a drug has been approved, we have a pretty robust system in place at the FDA to try and continue to monitor the safety of a drug. We understand when a drug is approved, we only have information on a few hundred or a few thousand patients, and we continue to learn a lot about that drug through the, as we use it more and through that life cycle. And so in that sense, we do use real world evidence through the MedWatch program that you mentioned earlier, and FAERS, which is the FDA Adverse Event Reporting System. And so we have several teams at the FDA and several offices that continue to review this information to see if there's potentially a new signal that we would need to take a regulatory action on, put information out to patients and providers, or even change labeling. I think another part of this question is how to use real world data or evidence from big data. And that's the really big question. So we have access to so much data nowadays through electronic health records, through claims data, registries, even things like Apple Watches and other digital devices. And so there's a host of information that is out there that really potentially could support other regulatory decisions, such as even adding new indications to a label, changing information we put in there regarding safety. One of the challenges is really trying to comb through this vast amount of information and trying to really curate all of that information. So there is a wealth of knowledge there, but it's trying to figure out how to again look at this well. We talked about adverse events also a few times and how that can be standardized. There's a standard way of reporting that. So, you can imagine that when you are going through the real world data, that trying to kind of comb through this, it's not reported in the same way. And so trying to make sense of that. So yes, we do use the real world data in the post-marketing setting to look for new safety signals and to help advise us in how we may need to change labeling or advise patients. And we're looking at even potential other implications for all of this data.
That's great. That's really great. Thank you for sharing that, Suparna. All right, a couple of other things here. There are so many questions. I will try to get to a couple of them right now quickly, the best I can. So someone wanted to know if there are any recordings of the conversations on cancer that we had talked about. And the answer to that is actually yes and no. It depends on if the presenter had given the ability to provide taping, and those can be searched through the FDA website. And also, there was a question about providing our Twitter handles. So I actually think I will, some of us have Twitter and some of us do not. And I will possibly give all of the information from our whole team to Sandy Sanford, and maybe she can distribute that actually through the foundation. I think that's probably the best way. Again, I had mentioned there's about 10 of us on the breast team, and we would love to share our Twitter handles. And I think that's probably the best way to do that. So again, I'm so sorry if we were unable to get to all the questions today. This was such a wonderful discussion, and I want to thank everyone on the panel today for providing such great responses, and those were all really helpful information for all of the patient advocates that were listening today. And we really do hope that you were able to learn something from this session, and we really hope that next year we are in person and can see all of your wonderful faces and do this panel live again. And again, thank you all for attending this session. If you have any further questions, again, we are on Twitter and we'll get you those handles, and we really look forward to further discussions with all the patient advocates. And thanks for working with us.
Thank you.